Hello and welcome to the 33rd edition of Half Hour, a podcast starring me, John Paulo Giudice, as your host. In today's episode, I will discuss diplomacy and security issues with Ambassador of Japan to the Czech Republic, Mr. Hideo Suzuki. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for
I really appreciate it. It's a tremendous opportunity to have you here. I've been working very hard on this show, and I'm really glad to have all sorts of different voices come on and really share their opinions. So this is a very special episode.
Pleasure is mine.
So to begin, what would you say, your background is, I guess where you're from, maybe what your education is, and, how did you get into this field? And, just if you want to develop that a bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, I'm from Japan, Japanese, born in Osaka, which is the western part of Japan, but grown up in Tokyo, because at my very young age, the family moved to Tokyo. So let's say Tokyo is Prague, Osaka is Brno, so to say. So I'm a little bit mixed of the two big trend of the Japanese trend of cultural civilization. So I've grown up in Tokyo, and I graduated from the University of Tokyo, Faculty of Law. So I'm a lawyer as a background. And to the question why I became a diplomat, it goes back to my very younger days. When I was 8 years old, because of my dad's job, the whole family moved to Paris for about 2.5 years. And so I was 8 years old, completely thrown into a different culture, different style of living. And that was fantastic, but at the same time very challenging. And it was in the 70s, in 1971 to 73. So it's before all the people talked about Japanese big economic growth, etc. So no one really knew about Japan, and it was very sometimes tough, And I felt I was very young, a child, but I felt the need to improve the communication of Japan and to make my country, my country standing at the same level with these big powers like France, where I lived, or other, let's say, the G7 countries now. At that time, of course, there was no G7, but, I wanted Japan to be responsible international partner, respected, but at the same time performing the responsibilities that are required to a big power like the Europeans or the Americans. I was very young, but I felt something like that. And during my stay in Paris, the Emperor of Japan at that time, Emperor Showa, came to visit Paris. And as a young child, I went to the airport to welcome him, to wave the flags, etc. And suddenly something hit in me, kind of real light that came. I want to serve this country. Of course, there are many ways to serve his or her country. It's not the monopoly of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not of the diplomats, but of course the business people contribute to their country, contributing to the economic growth and power of his or her country. And every profession can be sorted like that. But one of the rather far parents was a diplomat. Uncle of uncle, something, was a diplomat in Geneva. He came to see us in Paris, and there I thought maybe this is something that I could do and I want to do. So it's almost as as young as 10 years old that I had in my head to become diplomat.
Well, I think that's quite the story. I can say that, I flew here when I was 19 to do an exchange program. I was much older, obviously, but I can definitely agree that it's kind of tough to move to a new culture and kind of see how they do things. And I think it's a very noble pursuit that you want to help your country, be on good standing in the international community, and to really be like an important player in major global decisions. I think that's very a very well thought out statement and a good way of putting it. Did you learn any French when you lived there?
Yes, there were no Japanese school at that time, so I had to join French school with French little children without speaking any word at all in French. So the first months were a little bit difficult.
I can imagine, yeah. Being kind of thrown into this new reality can be very tough. So you said that in the 70s, the emperor at the time came to France, and you were able to go to the airport and kind of be there to greet him. What was that experience like?
Well, it was, of course, all the children were gathered around at the Embassy of Japan in Paris. And when I went to the airport, I didn't know at all about what is emperor. And I didn't know why. I was kind of forced to go there. But when I saw the emperor coming out from the airplane, and I saw he was already rather old. This old guy, old gentleman, should I say, with his spouse, landing at the Ori airport with full solemnity. I felt something completely different from my daily life with my parents or the family lives. And back to home, I consulted my encyclopedia, and that was really when I discovered my country's own history or identity. Paradoxically, it was not being in Japan that I discovered. It was being in Paris that I discovered what it is Japan, what's its history, the tradition, and got completely seduced by that. And this is really a kind of wake-up call for me, and this is explaining the full course of my life from that time. Being into the government is really something very obvious for me from that experience, I think.
So you stayed in France for some time, and then you returned to Japan?
Sure.
How old were you when you left France?
I was 10 years old.
Oh, okay.
Yes, still in the elementary school. Back to Japan, then I had to do again the efforts to readapt myself to the Japanese customs and the society. But this double experience, being in France, but also being back to Japan, and really experiencing by himself on my own, with my skin, all the differences of the two nations. But, well, I felt that really I could be some bridge, or I had to do something to so that people can understand better, and so that people can go back and forth much easier. It was not the case in the 70s. So, yeah.
I know that, from some of my courses at the university, Japan was actually a big player economically in the 70s, 80s, and 90s with like manufacturing. And even today, the country is still among like the top leaders in terms of GDP and kind of its ability to kind of, showcase itself on the world stage, especially in East Asia and Asia as a whole. So before you got to this position, you studied at the University of Tokyo, and you got your law faculty.
Mm-hmm.
How did your career, take this kind of path after that?
After that,
Mm-hmm.
so after graduating Tokyo University, I joined the ministry, passing a kind of examination
Mm-hmm.
To join. And then I was affected to what we call the French school of the ministry. That means those who are specialized in French language or France. And after 1 year experience in the headquarters in Tokyo, I was sent to Paris to study there for 2 years at what they call ENA, which is the National School Administration, to form the career civil servants and the politicians, etc. And after that, I spent a little bit of time in the IFRI, Institut Français des Relations Internationales, French Institute for International Relations.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
Just 6 months or so, something like that. And then working at the embassy. So after that, I will not enumerate everything, but it's a life of going abroad, going back to Tokyo, again to abroad, going back, etc. What I can say is that as a foreign posting, I've been in France twice. The first time in the bilateral embassy, the second time the Japanese delegation to the OECD, which is in Paris. I've been to America, Washington, D.C., Vietnam, Hanoi, Korea, Seoul, and Czech Republic is my fifth country where I have been posted. In the headquarters, I've done many things. I've been on security issues like Japan-US alliance treaty section, which deals with all the alliance issues, not always very easy, although allies.
Mm-hmm.
I've been many times also in the International Economic Cooperation Bureau, which deals with official development assistance, the ODA. We try to help the developing countries in Asia or Africa, everywhere, to build the national infrastructure structure or social structure, or helping build the agricultural, renew the agricultural system or health system, improving the school standard, these kind of things. I've done a lot. And also I have been more recently in charge of what we call the global issues, all that relates to sustainability, how to advance the sustainability agendas in the world and also in Japan, to really tackle the issues like global climate change. That was the most important issues at my time. Now I initiated also to tackle the issue of plastic waste, ocean plastic, these kind of things. So these are things that I very, very, very shortly, the domains where I have worked until now.
Well, that sounds wonderful. I mean, it sounds like a very rewarding career from what you were just saying. But to clarify, this is your fifth mission here.
Yes.
In the Czech Republic, and the previous ones in order were Vietnam first. Was that your first one?
No, France, United States, Vietnam, and Korea.
So you were the ambassador to the United States?
No. I was just first secretary, counselor, minister, so number 2, this kind of thing, deputy chief of mission. As ambassador, Czech Republic is my first assignment.
Oh, okay, wonderful. But you have tremendous experience, across these 5 countries, and what you were saying about the development in these developing countries with, building up the proper institutions, like schools and these other, important organs of the state. Would you say that Japan's mission is more, neighborhood based in this way? Like maybe you're building schools up in Laos or Malaysia or Vietnam rather than maybe, Eswatini or Angola?
Well, of course. I think neighborhood is the most important area that every country is dealing with. Mm-hmm. So for us, Indo-Pacific is by far the most important area to operate, especially in the developing assistance. But in Africa also, we are very, very active. It's been a long time, almost 2 decades, that we have initiated Tokyo International African Development Conference, what we call the TICAD, which the first of the kind to gather all the head of states of all the African countries in one place and to discuss really the strategy, the common strategy to develop the continent. This is, I think, we are very proud that we were the initiator of these kind of things. But of course, we don't have the monopoly of that. In TICAD, we invite also European Union, which has also a very, very big role to play in the African continent. And without European cooperation, without cooperating with the European Union, I think there is nothing we can do. So this is a kind of joint exercise that we're doing with the Europeans, with the Americans, and with the other partners. So we are very much present in Africa. And I want to highlight also that when we say Indo-Pacific, in our concept, it includes also the eastern coast of Africa, like Mozambique, or Kenya, Tanzania. This is a very important area that we are focusing on our assistance.
I know that some of those countries you mentioned, specifically Tanzania, Kenya, I know Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi are all speaking about trying to form some sort of East African Federation between them. And I'm wondering if, maybe other countries have maybe not an opinion, but kind of ideas surrounding that, because it would really shake the borders up in this continent.
Well, I'm not very much aware of this idea, but I think it's a good point. It's a good idea to try to unite the forces of these countries, especially for landlocked countries like Burundi, Rwanda, or Malawi. Cooperation with the coastal countries like Mozambique, Kenya, Tanzania is vital. So if they can understand each other better by forming some kind of coalition, federation whatsoever, I think all the better. And it'd be easier for us, donors, to design the project in a more kind of wider area, not kind of road ending here but starting again here, but a real plan of regional network of infrastructure. If they can come upon such an idea, it'd be very much welcome from the donator point of view.
Yeah, and kind of to move aside for just a moment, I was thinking about your comment about how you said, Japan obviously is focusing mostly in the Pacific, with the majority of its resources. It makes sense as an island country. I guess my next question might be, I'm aware that South Korea is the Republic of Korea, is obviously a neighboring state and is, the closest democracy to Japan, in the region geographically,
Yes.
And politically. How would you say that, these two countries are trying to move, their, collective interests forward, with regard to, not just the tensions in the South China Sea, but also, again, like the neighborhood policy and, Southeast Asia and the Indonesian islands?
Well, I think that the current Korean president, Mr. Yoon Suk-yeol, has a very open mind about cooperating with Japan and with the regional partners. And he is very eager to improve relations with Japan in every field, including the security area. So he's reconducting what we call the GSOMIA, the General Agreement on the Intelligence Sharing that we have bilaterally with Korea. He's supporting this. I noticed also his recent statement about regional security issues. He has said, as reported, he has said that unilateral use of force is not helpful, that is not something that can be acceptable. This is he is clearly sharing the same position as Japan on the regional stability. That's a very much a welcome statement. So this is something that we would like to pursue. The recent visit by President of Korea to Japan was very, very fruitful. We have agreed to have a regular visit back and forth between the two leaders. And just after that, we had a trilateral naval exercise with the United States, Japan, Korea. This is a very, how can I say that? Very good, positive development of the situation that could, I hope, develop to further cooperation on regional stability.
So I guess, another question I might have in the more broader picture, and I know South Korea and Japan both have a vested role in what I'm about to say, but when leaders speak of the rules-based international order, as an IR student, I'm pretty well aware of what that means. I obviously could always use some extra facts, but I guess my question would be, where does Japan see itself, in this rules-based international order? And additionally, with the quadrilateral dialogue, with what were the countries? Japan, Australia, the United States, and India. I believe these four. So I guess that's like an in tandem question.
Well, Japan wants to be the most fervent defender of international rule-based order. What is international rule-based order? Of course, there are several layers, but the most basic one is, of course, the Charter of the United Nations, to which every country, almost every country in the world, adheres to. We have other different treaties in different areas, like WTO or other regional free trade agreements in terms of economy. We have international laws with regard to security issues, how nations should behave when, for example, when they do military drill, exercise on the public open sea, these kind of things. freedom of navigation is one of the important rules that Japan upholds because, of course, Japan is an ocean country. Freedom of navigation is something that without it, Japan could not survive. But not only Japan, European Union, its trade, 40% of its trade, international trade, goes through South China Sea. So these are just an example of important international rule-based order that every country is supposed to abide by. We want to promote this. We, Japan, we want to promote this in different formats. Of course, bilateral relations, but also regional relations, like the Quad that you have mentioned. Quad is very rather new, but a very powerful framework for cooperation because it unites the American continent, Australia, Japan, and India. So, which is very much the major countries of the Indo-Pacific. So, and Quad is not only about security, military security, but also we are cooperating on COVID vaccines, on different social issues. So this is a very kind of multipolar, multifaceted framework that we want really to promote. But it's not the only one. We have ASEAN. For example, we have a very close cooperations with ASEAN. All through the year, we have ministerial meetings, summit meetings in different formats with the ASEAN. We value it very much because ASEAN obviously is another very important partner for Japan. We talked about Korea, but ASEAN is also a very, very important partner because of its diversity, because of the geography, they are the real center of the Indo-Pacific, and we share a lot of principles, including values or strategy about Indo-Pacific. ASEAN has adopted its own outlook for Indo-Pacific that is very close, or that has a lot of share to share with our own Indo-Pacific concept. So you have to understand that in Indo-Pacific there are multiple layers of cooperation. It's not like in Europe where you have the European Union and NATO. It's much more complicated than that.
Okay. And I guess, my next question, we don't have to discuss this, but do you think that the tensions between China and Taiwan will boil over into an armed conflict, and where does Japan see itself, along with the members of the Quad, in kind of addressing this situation? And is it possible that this conflict continues to escalate, given the scenario I just told you further?
Well, it's very difficult to predict these kind of things. And I think that this is not something that we can control 100%. But our position, our principle is very clear. Whatever it is, change of status quo by force, unilateral use of force, is unacceptable. Period. This is the principle. We have to send this message to all those who attempted to use force, unilateral force, to change the status quo for their interest, for their benefit. So how to send this message? How to make this message real and something that is can serve as deterrence to avoid this kind of armed conflict, as you said. This is what we are always discussing internally with the G7, with the Quad partners, with the different partners bilaterally, including the European Union. But the important thing is that we are united in sending the same message. Use of force not acceptable to change the status quo. And of course, this is done by diplomatic ways, but at the same time, to strengthen the deterrence, we have to be capable to respond to any kind of situations. That's why we, Japan, we have decided to increase our defense budget to 2% of GDP, which is roughly double of the current budget, like it's a case in the Czech Republic, I understand.
I know NATO's target is 2%.
NATO target
well.
is 2%, and the Czech Republic has adopted a law yesterday, something, to make this 2% target a legal one.
Oh, wonderful.
That's wonderful. That's extremely very solid stance of the Czech Republic that we support. So we have to do this kind of defense efforts at the same time.
Well, it appears that we're pretty much out of time, but I will say if you have any thoughts you'd like to share, before we wrap things up, any final things you want to put to the world, by all means.
Well, I think that I presume that the audience is mostly the young people like yourself, I would like to say that the future is really in your hands, and you are really deciding what kind of vision, what kind of world you want to have during all your active life, and also what you want to leave to your posterity. But I think that this is something that is extremely important to think about the future, to have a 30 years target, something like that, or goal, if you prefer, and to draw back and to ask always for yourself what you have to do, what you can do. At least that's what I tried to do during these more than 30 years of diplomatic activities. Thank you very much.
Well, I know that message resonates with me, and I hope to do my best to make positive change in the world. But, sir, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been a delight, and it's been an honor to have you here on my show. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The honor is mine. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
And look out for the next episode.